Hello and welcome to Karen's Creative Cards on YouTube. I am Karen Hashik, and in this video I am sharing a technique called Glazed Distress Oxide Technique, which I learned in videos by Tim Holtz and Jennifer McGuire. Both Tim and Jennifer used Ranger alcohol ink glossy cardstock, but I didn't have that, so I tried regular cardstock and HP photo glossy paper. I thought perhaps you were wondering too which glossy papers would work, so I decided to do a comparison. This is the regular cardstock, the regular glossy cardstock I used. I don't know who it's from, but it's just regular glossy cardstock sold anywhere. And I was not happy with the regular glossy cardstock because adding the distress glaze did not make these samples shine and show the layers like what happened in the videos I watched. So this is several of the colors on regular cardstock, regular glossy. And I did put glaze over it. No, this one is not glazed. Okay, so this is what it looks like before you put the glaze on, and then I put the glaze on, and it's kind of pretty, but it's not as nice as what I saw in the videos. And this is another example, and this too it's regular glossy paper and it has the glaze on it, and it's pretty enough, but nothing like what I was seeing happen. It's kind of like magic when you put the distress micro glaze on after you make these backgrounds. They just pop. So then I tried HP photo papers, and I was a little happier with these, as you can see in the samples. So this is one where it's the HP paper, and this side is not glazed and this side is. So if you can see that this is brighter, but it still didn't really pop like I saw. Here's another sample. This one has been glazed, and while it's pretty enough, it just isn't as pretty as, of course, I'm not as good as Tim and Jennifer, but so I asked in the Stamp Junkies Facebook group I am a member of if anybody knew the difference between Ranger alcohol ink glossy paper and the ones I had tried. I didn't want to place an order for just that somewhere, and I couldn't find it locally. I'm trying to stop ordering so many products and dies and stamps online. Haha, wish me luck. A very kind member of the Stamp Junkies group offered to send me a couple sheets so I could try it before buying it, and when I received it, it was the whole pack. She didn't want to be reimbursed, but wanted me to share my samples, and needless to say, one of these cards is going to be sent to her as a thank you. So this is the alcohol ink cardstock by Tim Holtz and Ranger. And here is a sample that shows much better. This is not glazed with the Distress Oxides, and this side has been glazed. And can you see how that's really all the layers show and the colors are much more vibrant? I did find that I liked the Ranger alcohol ink cardstock the best. Here's a sample of a thank you card that will probably be on the way to my friend, it again shows all the layers of the Distress Oxide and is much prettier. Here's one more sample I did before I started making cards, and again, it's just much prettier than the other cardstocks. Here are some samples, card samples I made so far with this technique. I started out making some kind of monochromatic cards. So this one has wild honey and fossilized amber, and a green too, I suppose. Yeah. And it's a Little Bee Sentiment and Tutti Designs fishing net and Impression Obsession fish. So here's one card that I made. Here's another. I did hello I did a little bit of foiling. So that's another sample. This one is another monochromatic one that I did picked raspberry, candied apple, and fired brook. And that's a Technique Tuesday die border, and Mr. and Mrs. by Honeybee. So that would make a nice wedding card. Here's another monochromatic one that I made with some blues. This is one of my favorite color combinations. It's wilted violet, peacock feathers, picked raspberry, and cracked pistachio. And that is a Gina Marie Designs stitched die, and a Frantic Stamper Band-Aid, and a Hero Arts stamp. And I find if you want a stamp on it, the Stays-On inks work the best. This one is another thank you card that I did with some a pretty combination of cracked pistachio, wilted violet, picked raspberry, and that one sample that I showed you before. Anyway, this is the second time, so, and I'm going to show you how I like to make 2 at a time, and the second one ends up being even more splotchy, and I think I like that even better. And this is the card that I'm going to make with you today. I used Wild Honey, Wilted Violet, Mermaid Lagoon, and Abandoned Coral to make this card, but I'm going to go back to my favorite picked raspberry, cracked pistachio, wilted violet, and peacock feathers combination. I also used a little inker die, the So Very Kind square stitched box, and I used little inker butterflies, the stitched butterflies. I love stitched dies, and I love the dual stitching that Lil Inker has, and it just makes it much more interesting to use those. So I am starting with an A2 card base and a piece of acetate when I make the shaker portion of it. What we do is, let's see what else I'm going to use. I'm going to use the Ranger Distress Micro Glaze. I am using some sequins from Sparkle Blend sequin mixes from Doodles Paper Playground. I'm using a Tim Holtz sponging tool, and a sponge that's dedicated to the distress glaze only. I'm using a heat gun, a spray bottle from Nuvo, and these inks. So the first thing that you're going to do this technique is you're going to rub 3 to 5 colors of Distress Oxide onto your craft mat. And you're going to spritz them with water. Now, somebody pointed this out in one of the videos I watched. If you put your glossy paper into that, you're going to kind of have a square splotch. So what they recommended and what works well is if you take a big brush, I'm just using a color duster from Judikins that I had from years ago, and just kind of move it around a little bit, then you don't have those square splotches, the square shapes on your card. So I found that's worked well for me. I like to make 2 at a time, and the reason is the first one looks very nice. The second one's even more spotted or splotchy, and I like that look. So now basically you're just gonna put it in and pick up some ink, and we're going to dry that with a heat gun in between every layer. I clean up the ink in between each time. I have this piece of skinny wood, I'm not sure what you would call it, that somebody gave me, and it works well, as you see in Jennifer McGuire's video. She uses a piece of wood like this to dry her pieces on and move them back and forth. And in addition to drying, you also are going to splotch up some of the extra ink with a soft towel. I don't have a lot of room to work here, so I'm going to move it back and forth in between layers. I clean off the paintbrush in between so I don't mix the colors right away. Okay, so this is the first one I had done, and I definitely want some more color over there. Getting pretty. Second time I knocked that brush down. So now we're going to dry it again. I think one more time. And moving those around a little bit so that they're not just squares. I see I mixed my colors a little bit there, but not a big deal. So I definitely want some more pink on this. I like that second one. It's even more splotchy and dotted. Like Tim would say, if you're putting in something that looks like a dot, that's what you're going to get, and that's pretty. Maybe a little more on the bottom. if we want any more color or not. I think a little bit more on here. This one's pretty good. I think because it is Distress Oxide, another thing that you can do is to drop drops of water. I find my best tool to do that is my Nuvo Light Mist bottle, just pulling out the sprayer part. And those water dots are going to oxide, I guess is the word, and form dots on there, which is kind of fun. You see those? I think I'm going to do a little more on this one. Just a little more green, a little more purple, I think. Well, this was the second one that I did, and I just decided that it needed just a little more color. It's pretty. And so one more drying. So these are the two that I just made, and those are kind of pretty, but when you put on the Distress Glaze, you will see that they will become even prettier. So I have a Velcro dot on the top of this, and that's where I keep this sponge, and this one is used only for the Distress Glaze. You only need a little bit. You just put it in there and rub it over the colors, over the Distress Oxide background. And it brightens it way up, especially after we rub it with a soft cloth. And you can see the layers that you put on. So these are our two backgrounds. This is the second one I made, so it has more splotches in there, and I think I like that the best, but I like this one too. They're unique, colorful backgrounds. They're different every time. So I'm going to make a card with this one. I am going to die cut So Very Kind out of a corner. Let's say this one. Make sure I have the top where I want it. Using my favorite purple tape. And my Gemini quickly. So that is the little Inker's So Very Kind cut out of there. We're going to make a shaker card, so I'm going to attach some acetate with regular tape to the back. I'll just use that little piece down here. To make the shaker, I have found that I am loving the Motion Crafts double-sided foam tape. It's thicker than mounting tape, so I don't need to use 2 layers like I was doing when I was using mounting tape. It's inexpensive, and it's sold at Motion Crafts or Uchi's Designs. I guess they're out of the white, but they do have the black, and I'll share a link to that in the description box. So as you can see, it's already cut and very easy to use. I'm just going to use the excess pieces around the corners. To raise the corners to be the same height as the shaker box is. See how much easier it is? I used to do 2 layers of mounting tape, and that would take much longer. And I'm really getting spoiled with these easy to use strips. Now I am making the front the same size as my A2 card. So what I like to do is line it up in the corner of my score buddy, and that way I can make sure that when I attach this that the top will be straight and not show any of the white. If any of the white shows around the edges, it doesn't matter, I can trim that off, but if it's not straight up here and if any white shows, then the card is ruined. So I do that. When I'm making a shaker card, I use my EK Success tool, powder tool, and I put powder around on the acetate and on the edges of the sticky strips so the sequins do not stick. I'm using 2 new sparkle blends from Doodles Paper Playground. And these are sample packages that I get as a member of the design team. So if you were to get these, they would be much larger. This one's called Peacock Pizzazz, so that has some of the blues in there that I used in this card. And this is Lilac Luster. So I'm picking up the purples and the blues and the greens from the Distress Oxides that I used. Not pretty mix. And now I'm going to remove the top of these foam strips. top of the card up with, press down so it sticks. And the shaker is working very well. It's going to be a thank you card for someone special. And I lined it up pretty good. It doesn't look, I need to maybe trim a little bit on the sides and the bottom. I'm going to add some stitched butterflies to this, and what I like to do is dress them up with a couple favorite sequins from that mix. So I pulled these pretty ones out that are sparkly and pink. I'm going to use some glue dots to attach these. And these are my favorite size, which are micros, and they work very well for sequins and other tiny things. Well, so our So Very Kind Distress Oxide card is complete with our pretty stitched butterflies. I had fun playing and making all the cards with this fun background technique. I hope you give it a try. Thanks for watching, subscribing, sharing, and thanks for helping me share the joy of creativity.